The Valorian flagship stretched across the darkness of space like a silver blade. Its hull gleamed under distant starlight, and inside its great halls, creatures from a dozen worlds gathered to discuss war. The Kethra swarm had consumed 3 star systems in the past cycle. Now the Galactic Coalition had formed to stop them, and every member species had sent their warriors. Princess Celira Vethan stood at the center of the command deck, her violet skin shimmering under the lights. She was tall and slender, with sharp features and eyes like molten gold. Her white hair fell past her shoulders, and she wore the ceremonial armor of the Valorian Royal Guard. She was young for a princess, barely 200 cycles old, but she had already proven herself in battle. Her mother, Queen Maleth, had trusted her to lead the Valorian contingent in this great alliance. Celira was proud of that trust. She would not fail Dot, but today, her pride was being tested. "The human delegation has arrived, Princess," said High General Corvan. He was an older Valorian, his face marked with scars from countless battles. His voice held no emotion, but Celira knew him well enough to see the doubt in his eyes. "Humans," she said, letting the word drip with contempt. "Why did the Coalition accept them? They are soft creatures from a small world. They have no fleet worth mentioning. Their technology is primitive. What can they possibly offer?" Corvan tilted his head. "The Council believes they have potential. They are new to the galaxy, but they have shown surprising resilience." "Resilience?" Celira laughed. "They live for less than a century. They are fragile. They break easily. I have read the reports. Their bones shatter. Their skin tears. They require constant sustenance and rest. How can such creatures fight the Kethra?" Corvan did not answer. He simply gestured toward the entrance, where the human delegation was now approaching. Celira turned to face them, and her lip curled with disdain. There were 5 of them. They wore simple gray uniforms with blue markings on their shoulders. They walked with straight backs and steady steps, but to Celira, they looked small and weak. Their skin came in various shades of brown and pink, and their eyes held none of the glow that marked the elder species. They were plain, ordinary, forgettable. The one at the front stepped forward. He was of average height, with short brown hair and calm gray eyes. His face was neither handsome nor ugly, just unremarkable. He saluted in the human fashion and spoke. "Commander Paul Greer, representing the Earth Coalition," he said. "We are honored to serve alongside the Valorian fleet." Celira did not return the greeting. She looked at him the way one might look at an insect. "You are here because the Council demanded it," she said coldly. "Do not mistake tolerance for welcome. You will follow Valorian command. You will not interfere with our strategies. You will stay out of the way unless called upon. Is that understood?" Commander Greer's expression did not change. "Understood, Princess." Behind him, one of the human soldiers shifted slightly. Celira's eyes moved to him. He was younger than the commander, with dark hair and a scar running along his jaw. His eyes were a deep brown, and unlike the others, he was looking directly at her. Not with fear, not with anger, just calm observation. "You," Celira said, pointing at him. "What is your name?" "Daniel Carter, Princess," he replied. His voice was steady. "You stare at me as if you have something to say. Daniel Carter. Speak." Daniel held her gaze. "I was just thinking that this ship is impressive. The Valorians have built something remarkable." Celira blinked. She had expected resentment or challenge. Instead, she received a compliment. It irritated her in a way she could not explain. "Of course it is impressive," she snapped. "It was built by a civilization with 10,000 years of history. Your species was still living in caves when we first traveled between stars." Daniel nodded. "That is true. We have a lot to learn." His calm response made her angrier. She wanted him to fight back, to give her a reason to dismiss him entirely. But he simply stood there, patient and unshaken. "Take them to their quarters," Celera ordered, turning away. "And keep them away from the primary systems. I do not trust them near anything important." The humans were led away as Celera returned to her command console. But her thoughts lingered on the one called Daniel Carter. There was something in his eyes that bothered her. Not defiance, but something else. Something she could not name. Hours later, the first joint strategy meeting took place. Representatives from 6 species gathered around a massive holographic display showing the Kethra positions. Celera presented the Valorian battle plan, a direct assault on the swarm's 4 bases. The other species agreed with minor adjustments. Then Daniel Carter raised his hand. Celera glared at him. "What?" "The Kethra always protect their flanks with sensor networks," Daniel said. "If we approach from the asteroid field in Sector 7, we can mask our signatures and hit them before they detect us." High General Kovan studied the display. His eyes narrowed. "The human is correct. The asteroid field would provide natural cover. We could reduce our casualties by 30%. Celera felt heat rise to her face. A human had just improved her plan in front of the entire coalition. "A lucky observation," she said through clenched teeth. "Nothing more." Daniel simply nodded and said nothing. The meeting ended as Celera returned to her quarters. She stood before the viewport, staring at the stars, her hands clenched at her sides. She hated humans. She hated their softness, their short lives, their unremarkable forms. And she especially hated Daniel Carter, who had looked at her without fear and spoken without anger. She would prove him wrong. She would prove all of them wrong. But deep in her chest, a small voice whispered something she refused to hear. Something about the way his eyes had held hers without flinching. She silenced the voice and prepared for war. An alarm suddenly blared through the ship. Red lights flashed. Kovan's voice came through the speakers. "Kethra scouting force detected. All hands to battle stations." Celera grabbed her weapon and ran toward the command deck. The first test had arrived. The Kethra came without warning. Their ships burst from hyperspace like dark insects, dozens of them swarming toward the Valorian flagship. Celera stood on the command deck, shouting orders as her crew scrambled to defensive positions. The holographic display showed enemy vessels closing fast, their organic hulls pulsing with sickly green light. "All batteries, open fire," Celera commanded. "Do not let them reach boarding range." The flagship shuddered as its cannons roared to life. Bright beams of energy tore through space, striking the Kethra scouts and sending several spinning into the void. But the swarm kept coming. They were relentless. They did not fear death. On the lower decks, Daniel Carter gathered his small team. There were only 4 of them, including Lucy Brennan, the team's medic. She was a woman with kind eyes and steady hands, and she had served with Daniel for 3 years. "We should get to the secondary command post," Lucy said. Daniel shook his head. "Something is wrong. The Kethra are too aggressive. They want something on this ship." Before anyone could respond, the floor beneath them shook violently. A terrible screeching sound filled the corridor, metal tearing against metal. Emergency lights flickered red. "Boarding pod," Daniel said. "They are inside." He drew his weapon and moved toward the sound. His team followed without question. On the command deck, Celera watched the security feeds with growing horror. The Kethra boarding pod had punched through the lower hull and released a dozen warriors into the ship. The creatures were nightmares made flesh. They stood on 4 legs with 2 additional limbs ending in sharp blades. Their bodies were covered in black chitin, and their heads were eyeless, sensing prey through vibrations and heat. Valorian soldiers rushed to intercept them, but the Kethra were faster and stronger. One by one, the defenders fell. Green blood splattered the walls. Screams echoed through the speakers. "Send reinforcements to Deck 7, Celera ordered, her voice tight with controlled fear. "All available units are engaged, Princess," Korvan replied. "We have no one to send." Celera watched the feed helplessly. The Kethra were cutting through her people, like grain before a scythe. Then something changed. A new figure appeared on the screen. A human, Daniel Carter. He moved through the corridor with his team behind him, his weapon raised. When the first Kethra saw him and charged, Daniel did not retreat. He fired twice, hitting the creature in its sensory organs. It screamed and stumbled, and Daniel closed the distance and fired again at point-blank range. The Kethra collapsed. Celera leaned closer to the screen, her eyes wide. Daniel kept moving. Another Kethra came at him from the side, its blade arm swinging. Daniel ducked beneath the strike, rolled, and came up firing. His shots were precise and calm. He fought like someone who had seen death many times and was no longer afraid of it. Lucy Brand stayed close behind him, pulling wounded Valorians to safety and treating their injuries even as the battle raged around her. The other two humans held the flanks, covering their teammates with disciplined fire. One Kethra broke through their line and lunged at Daniel. Its blade caught his shoulder, tearing through his uniform and drawing blood. Daniel grunted, but did not fall. He grabbed the creature's limb with his free hand, jammed his weapon against its throat, and fired. The Kethra fell dead. Daniel pressed on, blood running down his arm. He saved 7 Valorian crew members in the next 10 minutes, personally killing 4 more Kethra. By the time Valorian reinforcements finally arrived, the boarding party was destroyed. Celera watched all of it. She did not speak for a long time after the battle ended. The Kethra fleet retreated, having failed to achieve whatever objective they had sought. The coalition forces regrouped, counted their losses, and began repairs. Victory was theirs, but it had come at a cost. Celera found herself walking toward the medical bay. She told herself it was to check on her wounded soldiers. But when she arrived, her eyes immediately found Daniel Carter. He sat on a treatment bed while Lucy Brennan stitched his shoulder wound. His face was pale from blood loss, but his expression remained calm. He looked up when Celera approached, and their eyes met. "Princess," he said, nodding respectfully. Celera stopped a few feet away. She did not know what to say. She had spent days insulting this man, dismissing his species, treating him as less than nothing. And he had just bled to save her people. "You disobeyed orders," she finally said. "You were assigned to the secondary command post." "Yes," Daniel agreed. "I did. Why?" Daniel considered the question. "Because your people needed help, and we were close enough to give it." Celera felt something twist in her chest. It was not anger. It was something else. Something uncomfortable. "You almost died," she said. "Almost," Daniel replied. "But not quite." Lucy finished the stitching and applied a bandage. She glanced at Celera with curious eyes but said nothing. Celera looked at Daniel's wound, then at his face. "You fight well." For a human, it was the closest thing to a compliment she had ever given his kind. Daniel seemed to understand this. A small smile touched his lips. "Thank you, Princess." Celera turned and walked away quickly, her heart beating faster than it should have. She did not understand what was happening to her. She had hated humans her entire life. Her father had taught her that they were inferior, that they would never amount to anything. But Daniel Carter had fought like a warrior. He had saved Valorian lives without hesitation, without asking for anything in return. He had taken a blade meant for others. She returned to her quarters and stood before the viewport again. Her reflection stared back at her, and she did not recognize the confusion in her own eyes. A message arrived on her console. Intelligence reports indicated a massive Kethra assault was forming. Their target was Stories 4, a Valorian colony world with 2 million citizens. The real war was about to begin, and Celera knew, somehow, that Daniel Carter would be at the center of it. Stories 4 was a beautiful world. Its forests stretched across 3 continents, and its cities rose like silver towers among the trees. 2 million Valorians called it home. Children played in parks beneath purple skies. Families gathered for evening meals as the twin suns set. It was a world of peace, far from the wars that plagued the galaxy. But war had found it. Celera stood on the surface, watching transports unload soldiers and supplies. The Coalition had sent everything it could spare, but it would not be enough. Intelligence reported that the Kethra were sending a force of over 10,000 warriors. The Swarm wanted this world, and they would sacrifice everything to take it. The human contingent has arrived, Princess, Corvan reported. Celera turned to see Daniel Carter walking toward her. His shoulder was bandaged beneath his uniform, but he moved without pain. Humans healed faster than she had expected. Another surprise from a species full of them. You will coordinate ground defenses in the eastern sector, she told him. Your team will work directly with mine. Daniel nodded. Understood. They spent the next 3 days preparing defenses. Trenches were dug, shield generators were placed, and evacuation routes were established. Celera found herself working alongside Daniel more often than she had planned. She told herself it was necessity. The eastern sector was critical. She needed to oversee it personally, but she knew the truth. She wanted to understand him. On the second day, she saw Daniel kneeling beside a young Valorian girl. The child had been separated from her family during the evacuation. She was crying, her small hands covering her face. Daniel spoke to her softly, his voice gentle. "Hey there," he said. "What is your name?" "Talia," the girl whispered. "That is a pretty name, Talia. My name is Daniel. I am going to help you find your family, okay? Can you tell me what your mother looks like?" Celera watched from a distance as Daniel calmed the girl, took her hand, and led her to the evacuation center. Within an hour, he had reunited her with her parents. The mother wept with gratitude. The father bowed deeply, a gesture of highest respect among Valorians. Daniel simply smiled and returned to his duties. That night, Celera found Daniel sitting alone on a hill overlooking the city. The twin suns had set, and 3 moons hung in the sky, casting silver light across the land. She approached and sat beside him without asking permission. "You were kind to that child," she said. Daniel shrugged. She was scared. Anyone would have helped. "Not anyone," Celera replied. "Many would have left her for others to handle. You stopped in the middle of your duties. Children are important. They are what we fight for in the end." Celera was quiet for a moment. Then she asked something she had wanted to ask for days. "Tell me about your world." "About Earth?" Daniel looked at her with mild surprise, then smiled. "What do you want to know?" "Everything." So he told her. He spoke of blue oceans and green forests, of mountains that touched the clouds and deserts that stretched forever. He told her of human history, of wars and peace, of great achievements and terrible failures. He spoke of art and music, of love and loss, of dreams that drove his people to reach for the stars. Celera listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was silent for a long time. "I was taught that humans were inferior," she finally said. "My father said you were nothing but animals with clever hands. I believed him my entire life. And now?" Daniel asked. "Now I am not sure what to believe." Daniel did not seem offended. "We are used to being underestimated. It happens everywhere we go. But we have learned that words mean nothing. Only actions matter. We prove ourselves by what we do, not by what we say." Celera looked at him. "You are very calm about this. I have treated you badly since the moment we met. You were honest about your feelings, Daniel said. I would rather have that than false kindness. And people can change. I believe that. Before Celira could respond, an explosion lit up the distant horizon. Alarms began to wail. Soldiers scrambled to their positions. Kethra scouts. Kavan's voice came through her communicator. They are testing our defenses. Celira and Daniel ran to the forward position together. The scouts were already retreating, but they had found weaknesses. The main assault would come soon. The next morning, Celira led a patrol through the eastern forest. Daniel and his team accompanied her. They moved in silence, weapons ready, eyes scanning the shadows between the trees. The ambush came without warning. Kethra warriors burst from underground tunnels, their blade arms slashing. Celira's guards were hit first, 3 of them falling before they could react. She drew her weapon and fired, killing one attacker, but another struck her from behind. Its blade cut across her back, and she fell with a cry of pain. The Kethra raised its arm for the killing blow. Daniel's shot took it, through the head. He was at her side in seconds, pulling her behind a fallen tree while his team laid down covering fire. Blood soaked her uniform. The pain was immense. Stay with me, princess, Daniel said. Lucy is coming. More Kethra emerged. 5, then 10, then more. Daniel stood over Celira, firing with both hands, his face set in grim determination. He killed 3 in the first 5 seconds. A 4th reached him and slashed his leg. He stumbled, but did not fall. He kept fighting. Lucy arrived and began treating Celira's wound. Through blurred vision, Celira watched Daniel battle alone against the swarm. He was wounded in the arm, then the side. Blood covered him, but he would not retreat. He would not leave her. Reinforcements finally arrived. The Lorian soldiers poured into the forest and drove the Kethra back. When the last enemy fell, Daniel collapsed to his knees. Celira crawled to him, ignoring her own pain. She took his hand and held it tightly. You saved me, she whispered. Daniel looked at her with tired eyes. I told you. Actions, not words. Then he lost consciousness. Celira did not leave his side as they carried him back to the medical station. She stayed with him through the night, watching over him, her hand never leaving his. Something had changed. Something she could no longer deny. Daniel woke to soft light and a gentle hand holding his. He opened his eyes slowly, blinking against the brightness. The medical tent was quiet. Monitors beeped softly nearby, and the smell of antiseptic filled the air. He tried to sit up, but pain shot through his body, and he fell back with a grunt. Do not move, a familiar voice said. You nearly died. He turned his head and saw Celira sitting beside his bed. Her back was bandaged beneath a simple tunic, but she seemed to have recovered well. Her golden eyes watched him with an expression he had never seen before. Something soft. Something worried. How long? He asked. 2 days. Your wounds were severe. Lucy Brennan said any other species would have died from blood loss. But you kept fighting. Daniel managed a weak smile. Humans are stubborn. Yes, Celira said. I am beginning to understand that. She released his hand suddenly, as if realizing she had been holding it. A slight color rose to her violet cheeks. She looked away. I stayed to make sure you recovered, she said quickly. You saved my life. It was a matter of honor. Of course, Daniel replied. He did not mention that she could have sent a servant to watch over him. He did not mention that a princess sitting at a human's bedside for 2 days was extraordinary. He simply accepted her explanation because he understood that she was not ready to admit more. Over the following days, Daniel recovered with surprising speed. Lucy Brennan checked on him regularly, and she noticed the frequency of the princess's visits with knowing eyes. She likes you, Lucy said one afternoon. Daniel shook his head. She tolerates me. There's a difference. I have been a medic for 15 years. I know what it looks like when someone cannot stay away from a patient. And it is not just obligation. Daniel did not respond, but his heart beat a little faster. When he was finally cleared to leave the medical tent, Celira was waiting outside. She walked with him through the camp, past soldiers who stared at the unlikely pair. A human and a Valorian princess, side by side. We should discuss defensive adjustments for the eastern sector, Celira said formally. Of course, Daniel agreed, but they did not discuss defenses. Instead, they walked to the hill where they had talked before, and they sat beneath the 3 moons. I have been thinking, Celira said after a long silence, about what you said, that people can change, and I was wrong. About humans. About everything I believed. She turned to face him. I have hated your kind since I was a child. My father taught me that you were beneath us, and I never questioned it. Until you. Daniel met her gaze. What changed? You fought for people who looked down on you. You bled for strangers who called you inferior. You saved my life without hesitation. She shook her head slowly. No one has ever done that for me. Not my guards. Not my generals. Not even my own family. It was the right thing to do. That is exactly my point. Celira's voice cracked slightly. You did not ask what you would gain. You did not calculate whether I was worth saving. You simply acted. And that is something I have never understood until now. She reached out and took his hand again. This time, she did not let go. I am sorry, she said, for every insult, every dismissal, every cruel word. I was blind and foolish, and you deserve better. Daniel squeezed her hand gently. Apology accepted. But Celira, you do not owe me anything. What matters is not where someone starts. What matters is that they grow. She looked at him with something like wonder. How can you be so kind? After everything? Because I see who you are becoming. I like that person very much. They sat together until the moons began to set. Neither spoke again, but the silence was comfortable. Something had shifted between them. Something neither was ready to name. The next morning, High General Convan summoned Celira to his command post. Your attachment to the human has been noticed, he said bluntly. There are whispers among the officers. Concerns about your judgment. Celira stiffened. My judgment is not impaired. I am not questioning your competence, Princess. But you must understand the political implications. A royal heir spending time with a human soldier. Your mother has received reports. What did she say? Corvan hesitated. She said she wants to understand. She has requested a private communication with you. That night, Celira stood before a holographic image of Queen Maleth. Her mother's face was calm but curious, showing no anger. Tell me about this human, the Queen said. Celira took a deep breath and told her everything. The battle on the flagship. The ambush in the forest. The conversations on the hill. She held nothing back. When she finished, the Queen was silent for a long moment. You have changed, Maleth finally said. I can see it in your eyes. You are no longer the child who hated without question. Is that wrong? No, the Queen smiled faintly. It is growth. Something I had hoped for, but never expected so soon. What should I do? That is not for me to decide. But whatever you feel, be certain. A princess's heart carries the weight of nations. The communication ended, and Celira was left alone with her thoughts. She found Daniel at the eastern perimeter, checking the defenses. He turned when he heard her approach. The Kethra main fleet has entered the system, he said. They will be here by morning. Celira nodded. The final battle was coming. Daniel, she said, Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something. He waited. She stepped closer and took both his hands in hers. I do not know what this feeling is. I have never felt it before. But when I am with you, the universe makes more sense. Daniel looked at her with soft eyes. I feel the same way. For a moment, neither moved. Then Celira leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a Valorian gesture of deep affection. Survive tomorrow, she whispered. That is an order. Yes, princess. They separated as the alarms began to sound. The Kethra had arrived. The largest battle of the war was about to begin. The sky burned. Kethra drop pods fell like black rain, crashing into the forests and fields of Thures IV. Each pod released dozens of warriors, their blade arms gleaming in the light of distant explosions. The coalition forces met them with everything they had, but the swarm kept coming. Wave after wave after wave. Celira commanded from the central bunker, her voice steady as she directed her forces. The holographic display showed enemy positions spreading across the map like a dark stain. They were losing ground on every front. Eastern sector is holding, Korvan reported. The human is leading the defense there. Celira watched Daniel's position on the display. His small team was facing 3 times their number, but they had not retreated a single step. He was buying time for the evacuation transports to launch. Tell him to fall back, she ordered. He refuses. He says the civilians are not clear yet. Of course he did. The battle raged for hours. The coalition held the line, but casualties mounted. Valorian, human, and soldiers of a dozen other species fell side by side. The ground was soaked with blood of every color. Then came the message that changed everything. Intelligence has identified a Kethra command node, Korvan said urgently. 3 kilometers behind enemy lines. If we destroy it, their coordination will collapse. The swarm will lose cohesion. Can we reach it? Celira asked. Only a small team could get through. The approach is through heavy forest. Too dangerous for a large force. Before anyone could speak, a voice came through the communication channel. I will go. It was Daniel. Celira's heart stopped. No, that is suicide. It is our best chance. My team knows how to move through terrain like that. We can reach the node. You will not survive the return, she said, her voice breaking. Maybe not. But if we do not do this, no one survives. 2 million people, Celira. We cannot let them die. She wanted to argue. She wanted to order him to stay. But she knew he was right. And she knew she could not stop him. Come back to me, she whispered. I will try. The communication cut off. Celira stared at the display as Daniel's team began moving toward the enemy position. 5 humans against an army. It was madness, but humans were mad. That was what made them extraordinary. Daniel led his team through the forest, moving silently between the trees. Lucy Brennan stayed close behind him, her medical kit ready. The other 3 soldiers covered their flanks. They encountered Kethra patrols twice and eliminated them quickly, leaving no survivors to raise alarms. The command node was a massive organic structure, pulsing with green light. Hundreds of Kethra surrounded it, clicking and shrieking in their strange language. Daniel studied the defenses and made his plan. We plant the charges and run, he said. No heroics, just speed. They moved like ghosts. 2 of his soldiers drew the guards away while Daniel and Lucy approached the node itself. He planted the explosive charges while she covered him, shooting down a Kethra that came too close. Done, Daniel said. Let's go. They ran. Behind them, the charges detonated with a thunderous explosion. The command node shattered, and the Kethra around it screamed in confusion. Across the battlefield, the swarm began to falter, but escape was not easy. Kethra warriors poured after the human team, shrieking with rage. One of the soldiers fell, then another. Lucy took a blade to her shoulder but kept running. Daniel covered the retreat, firing until his weapon ran empty, then fighting with his knife. They were cornered in a small valley, surrounded on all sides. Daniel stood in front of Lucy and their one remaining teammate, his knife raised, blood dripping from a dozen wounds. "It was an honor," he said quietly. The Kethra closed in, and fire rained from the sky. Valorian fighters screamed overhead, their cannons tearing into the swarm. Ground vehicles crashed through the trees, soldiers pouring out with weapons blazing. And at the front of the rescue force was Celira, her sword drawn, her eyes burning with fury. She had come for him. The Kethra were slaughtered. Celira cut down 3 herself before reaching Daniel. He collapsed into her arms, barely conscious. "You came," he whispered. "Of course I came. I ordered you to survive." He smiled weakly. Still trying. The battle turned after that. With their command node destroyed, the Kethra lost coordination. The coalition counterattacked on all fronts, driving the swarm back. By sunset, the enemy was in full retreat. Tyrus IV was saved. 2 days later, a victory celebration was held in the capital city. Soldiers of every species gathered to honor the fallen and celebrate the living. But all eyes were on the central platform, where Princess Celira stood beside a bandaged human soldier. "This man saved our world," she announced to the crowd. "He and his team gave us victory when all seemed lost. He is a human, and I once believed his kind were beneath us. I was wrong." She turned to face Daniel. The crowd fell silent. "I have been taught many things in my life," she continued. "But the most important lesson I ever learned came from a soldier who should have hated me. He taught me that true strength is not in power or pride. It is in compassion, in sacrifice, in choosing to protect others, even when it costs everything." She took his hand and raised it high. "I love this man, and I'm not ashamed." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then, slowly, applause began. First from the humans, then from the Valorian soldiers who had fought beside them, then from the civilians who had been saved. The cheering spread until the entire city echoed with it. Daniel looked at Celira with shining eyes. "Are you sure about this?" "I have never been more sure of anything." He pulled her close and pressed his forehead against hers. "I love you too. I have since the first time you insulted me." She laughed, tears streaming down her face. "You are a strange man, Daniel Carter, and you are the most beautiful princess in the galaxy." Above them, the twin suns set behind the silver towers. And across the stars, word spread of the human who had won the heart of a princess on the battlefield. It was the beginning of something new, something that would change the galaxy forever. But for now, they simply held each other, watching the sun set on a world they had saved together.